Good afternoon, everyone. Les recordamos que por deferencia a nuestro invitado internacional, esta sesión será prácticamente toda en inglés. Welcome to the 9th session this year of the Language Technologies Seminar hosted by El Colegio de México. Thank you all for joining us both on campus and online. As a reminder, this talk is being streamed live. It is being recorded and will be made available later on the institution's various platforms. This time we have the great pleasure of hosting an international guest, Professor Mark Davis, American linguist, renowned for his pioneering work in the field of corpus linguistics. Even though many of us know him for his work, and we use the corpora he has created quite a lot, I will now read some highlights of his biography. After receiving his PhD in Ibero-Romance, Philology and Linguistics from the University of Texas at Austin in 1992, he served first as a professor of Spanish at Illinois State University before joining the faculty at Brigham Young University in 2003. At BYU, he taught courses in corpus linguistics, historical linguistics, and English grammar. He has published 6 books and approximately 90 articles, given numerous presentations at international conferences, and has been the recipient of multiple grants from organizations such as the National Endowment for the Humanities and the National Science Foundation. Professor Davis' primary areas of expertise include corpus linguistics, not only in English, but in Spanish and Portuguese as well, specifically design and optimization of linguistic databases, frequency analyses, and language change. But Professor Davis is best known as the creator of an extraordinary suite of online corpora, which are collectively the most widely used corpora nowadays. His most influential creations include the Corpus of Contemporary American English, COCA, as well as Spanish and Portuguese corpora, among other datasets. We can attest that the vast corpora he has made available on his website are an indispensable resource for our own work, as it provides part of the necessary data that allow us to draft our lexicographical definitions. And he continues to be at the forefront of the field, as these online corpora have integrated AI, specifically LLMs, into his website interface. The title of our guest's presentation is AI LLM Integration with the Corpora from EnglishCorpora.org. Before we begin, a brief reminder. Following Professor Davies' presentation, we will open the floor for a question and answer space. We welcome questions from both our in-person and online audiences. A todo el público, si quieren formular o escribir sus preguntas en español, pueden hacerlo. Seguramente el profesor Davies las entenderá, pero puedo traducirlas en caso de ser necesario. Please join me in welcoming our guest. Professor Davies, we are delighted to hear your presentation.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias por la invitación. Hace mucho que no hablo mucho en español. Parece ya en otra vida, hace 20, 25, 30 años que sí enseñaba en español, pero tengo que decir que en los últimos 10, 15 años casi nada, por lo menos con el español hablado. Entonces, si me perdonan un poco, sí, creo que sería un poco mejor hacer la presentación, dar la ponencia en inglés. Pero, como se ha dicho, si hay preguntas después que quieren hacerme en español, está bien. Ojalá que las entienda, pero como se ha dicho, si están escritas las preguntas en español, podríamos traducirlas al inglés o lo que sea. Entonces, de ahora en adelante, el resto de la ponencia la voy a hacer en inglés. Well, again, Thanks so much for the invitation. It's great to be with you. And as I said, it's been a long time since I've spoken Spanish much. So as mentioned previously, I'm going to go ahead and do this in English. But again, if you have questions afterwards, feel free to ask them in Spanish. And if we need to translate them to English, we can do that. Okay, so the presentation that I'll be giving today, and can all of you see this okay?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Good. Usually when I do a presentation like this, I do it live. But this time I think that, and that has the advantage of showing that these aren't just canned searches, that they really do work, and I'm doing them, but someone else could be doing the same search. But just for the sake of simplicity and just to make sure there's no problems today, I think I'm going to go ahead and do it from the PowerPoint slides. So yeah, today I'll be talking about some new features that I've added in the last about 5 or 6 months, and they've been available to the public for about 2 months now, that I think do some really interesting things with integrating artificial intelligence, AI, using LLMs into the corpora. So that's pretty much what I'll be talking about today. There's a subtitle here, or the relevance of large structured corpora in the age of large language models. So right now in corpus linguistics, there's a huge debate about how much we should be using AI with corpora, or whether we should even be using it at all. There's a number of people who are making arguments that we shouldn't even be using AI with corpora. And I believe that we should, understanding the limitations. So this presentation is going to be about 60 minutes long, and then we'll have time for questions. So it's going to be in 3 different parts. I'm going to give a quick introduction for those who are not already really familiar with the corpora from EnglishCorpora.org, as well as the Corpus del Español. And then I'm going to spend about 10 minutes comparing the predictions of large language models to actual corpus data. So if you ask ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude from Anthropic about word frequency, what words occur with others, which ones are more common in one country than another, or over time, how well do the predictions of the large language models, how well do they match actual corpus data? So I'll spend about 10 minutes on that. And when I originally did that research about a year ago, 10 months ago, I kind of thought it was an either or kind of thing. Corpora versus AI. But in March of this last year, I thought, no, it's not really either or. Why not join the two together and use the advantages of AI with the strengths of a corpus-based approach? So in a sense, this is the best of both worlds. We take the advantages of corpora, we take the advantages of AI, and we marry them together. Okay, so again, I'm going to spend 15, 20 minutes, maybe less, just giving a quick overview of EnglishCorpora.org and the Corpus del Español. So EnglishCorpora.org, as has been mentioned, are the most widely used online corpora, about 75,000 distinct registered users each month. There are other corpus sites that have much, much, much larger corpora, but typically these are taken just from web pages. And there really is an advantage to using corpora that have data from lots of different genres, lots of different time periods, lots of different countries, and the ability to compare. The search functionality, I believe, is quite powerful for these corpora. You can search, of course, by word or lemma, part of speech. You can even search by synonym, customize word lists that you've created, and much more. Virtual corpora. I'll give really quick examples of those. It's useful for researchers, yeah, but it's also, I think, very useful for language teachers and language learners. And the last thing that I'd say is there's this idea in corpus linguistics that you need a huge team of researchers to create corpora, and you need millions of dollars to do it. And nearly all of these corpora that I'm talking about were created by just one person, me, with fairly limited funds. So it really is a myth that you need to have these huge teams of researchers. Yeah, there's advantages to large teams of researchers, but it can be done with a much smaller group. All right, so at englishcorpora.org, there's 17 different corpora. There's lots and lots of training materials, videos, overviews, short or overviews, 3-4 pages, long, long, long overviews, 20, 25 pages, lots of PDF guides, lots of videos, and I'll just be talking about this very quickly. One thing that I should mention, COCA is probably the most widely known of these corpora, the corpus of contemporary American English. But like I mentioned, there's 16 other corpora, and each of them has their own particular strengths. For example, the Now corpus has about 23 billion words of data from 20 different countries. It grows by 8 to 10 million words of data each day. And you can do a search where you can zero in, not just by year, the frequency by year, but even by month and even by day. So this is an example from a presentation I did a few months ago where after Pope Leo had been elected Pope, you could just put in Pope. Yeah, it shows you that it increases in frequency in 2025 and in May and the day that he was elected, May 8th. Now, you can do this with anything, a word like, or a phrase like fake news, which is something we talk about a lot in the United States for obvious reasons. And you can zero in actually on the particular day that a word or phrase starts being used more. You can create virtual corpora with any of these 17 corpora really easily. You can create a corpus in 5 or 10 seconds, and then you can search just that virtual corpus. So for example, I could say, and I'm sorry, I apologize in advance for things that my government, the government of the United States, is doing. It's very awkward and very sad to have to deal with some of these things. But one of the things that we're talking about in the United States and obviously in Mexico, Canada, and other countries are tariffs. So you could create a tariffs corpus very quickly. You just put in the word tariffs. You say, find me the 100 or 1,000 best texts dealing with this word or phrase. And then you can find the keywords from that virtual corpus and you can search just within that virtual corpus. So any topic you're interested in, anything. And again, in the now corpus, you've got 23 billion words. So you can create a corpus on anything virtually, and then extract data from that. You can browse through the top 60,000 words in the corpus. This is for COCA. You can search by word form, meaning, part of speech, pronunciation. So, for example, I could say, find me words starting with S that mean something like to walk, and they're verbs, and they have 2 syllables. So we have all that information, and then it'll say, okay, well, these are the words that match that: stumble, shuffle, stagger, saunter, sleepwalk, scuffle, blah, blah, blah. And for each one of these words, you can get a wide range of information. So you can search through the top 60,000 words in really powerful ways. And then for each one of these words, you can get a really in-depth word sketch. You can find the frequency by genre, you get definitions, you can click to see images, videos, pronunciation of the word. You can find collocates. So this is the word path. These are collocates. You could click on collocates and get even more detail. You can get related topics, words that occur anywhere in the text, not just within 4 or 5 words, but co-occurring words anywhere in the text. Morphologically related words, synonyms, word clusters, 2, 3, 4 word clusters, concordance lines, and so on. You can do this for each one of the top 60,000 lemmas in COCA, for example. You can also analyze the text of a given, the words and phrases in a given text that you input, and then see corpus data related to that. So, for example, from CNN, I could copy in the text for this text, this article from CNN. I just paste it in. It shows me the keywords, and then I could click on any of those keywords or any of the words in the text and get a really, really in-depth word sketch. Okay, so other sites talk about word sketches, but they're only collocates. With EnglishCorpora.org, you get much, much, much more than collocates. Okay. So for Spanish, it's the same type of thing. It uses just the same interface, exactly the same interface as with EnglishCorpora.org. So there's 3 different corpora that are available in El Corpus del Español, which I created. I started creating this way, way, way back in 2000, 25 years ago. This first corpus, number 1, the genre and historical corpus, because I was trained as a historical linguist. So I was creating a corpus that I found interesting and that I hoped others would. And then about 10 years ago, I dramatically expanded these corpora so that they now have about 9 billion words of data. And you can take a tour, which is 15, 20 pages long, where it tells you just kind of everything that you can do with the Corpus del Español. And you can have that in either English or Spanish, as you see here. For those of you that are familiar with the corpora from the Real Academia Española, for example, Corpes, If you go to the corpus, you can see a nice comparison of the Corpus del Español and the corpora from the Real Academia. So, I mean, you can do all kinds of searches here, just as with the English corpora. So you can, for example, say, I want to find me or le, followed by any form of hacer. Sorry, as we say in English, I have a frog in my throat today. I've got a little bit of allergies. So my throat, I'm kind of hoarse, un poco ronco hoy. So sorry, I got to keep drinking water as I'm presenting this. So you could do a search like this, and if you've used CQP, this is much, much, much easier syntax than CQP. So you do the search. These are the matching strings. You can click on any of these, see the word or phrase in context, and then click on any of those to get even more context, as well as a link to the original text, assuming that it's still online. So you can get lots and lots of context, but the searching really is very fast, very easy. You can search billions of words of data in 1 or 2 seconds. Same as with the English corpora, you can create virtual corpora. So for example, if you're interested in medical issues and you want to look at vocabulary related to diabetes, you could just put in hypoglycemia, find text. It will say these are the best texts. That took 2 or 3 seconds. You create a virtual corpus, and then you can extract keywords from that virtual corpus, or you can search just within that virtual corpus. Same thing as with English, you can search through a list of the top 40,000 words. So for example, this is the 22,000th most frequent word in the corpus, and I've limited it just to nouns, okay? And for each one of these words, you can get definitions in English, you can get synonyms, you can find collocates, you can find topics, words that co-occur anywhere in the corpus. You can see the frequency across all 20 countries in this particular corpus. You can see concordance lines. There's links to external resources for definitions, images, videos, pronunciation, and so on. So you can imagine if you're a language learner, this is really, really, really useful information. Just as with English, you can take a text, paste it in, and then it will give you keywords. And again, you can click on any one of those keywords or any word at all in the text to get this type of display, which exists for the top 40,000 words. Okay, so that's a quick introduction to the English corpora and to the Corpus del Español. Now what I want to do is I want to spend about 10 minutes talking about, okay, so, AI, artificial intelligence, is on everyone's mind. Everyone's talking about it. Anything you use, it says, oh, well, you can use AI with this, okay? So for linguistics, this raises the question of how well do the insights or the predictions of large language models, how well do these actually match corpus data? Okay, and so if you go to englishcorpora.org, right there on the front page, you'll see a link to what we're about to talk about here. Okay. So I did a lot of research on this starting about a year ago, and I spent about 4 or 5 months, 7 very, very, very detailed studies comparing LLM predictions against actual corpus data. This was just for English, but I believe that the conclusions match what we would have found for Spanish very, very well. Okay. So I looked at word frequency, phrase frequency, collocates, comparing words via collocates, genre-based variation, historical variation, and dialectal variation. So for each one of these topics, there's a really long white paper, kind of like an article that compares LLMs and the corpus data. Okay, it's almost 90 pages of data, more than 100 different tests that I do to compare the two. So let's talk very briefly about how LLMs do. Okay, first of all, large language models are incredibly good at generating collocates for a given word. So, for example, in English, this is a colander, okay? It's like a bowl that you use. Water can go through. You use it to rinse off fruits, vegetables, and so on. These are the collocates from Sketch Engine. These are the collocates from EnglishCorpora.org, from the iWeb corpus, which is about 14 billion words. And I could say, okay, Chat GPT, okay, Gemini, what do you think are the top collocates? And it will give those to you by verb where colander is an object, verbs where colander is the subject, adjectives that occur with it, nouns that occur with it. But what's really, really, really powerful is in addition to giving you these lists, the LLM can also say, okay, based on the collocates that I think occur with this word, these are what the collocates tell me about the meaning and usage of the word. Okay. So for those of you that are familiar with large language models and how they work, it shouldn't be a surprise that LLMs are so good at collocates because deep down, words are stored as word embeddings with these semantic vectors, which show the relationship between words. I mean, deep down, it's not just collocates. It's so much more powerful than collocates. So to be completely honest, what we're doing in corpus linguistics, showing collocates like this is so old-fashioned compared to what LLMs can do, okay? So these are, for example, this is just a larger picture of what you have here. These are the collocates from Sketch Engine for colander, but again, it's not even close to what the LLMs can do. So one other you can also use these collocates to compare words. So for example, in Sketch Engine, if I want to compare the words nuance and subtlety, then it's going to show me lists like this, where the words that occur with nuance are in green, the words that occur with subtlety are in red, okay? So that's a larger picture of what you see here. You can do the same thing with EnglishCorpora.org. Okay. But we can also say, okay, sketch engine, or excuse me, okay, chat GPT, okay, Gemini, compare these two words and using the collocates that you, LLM, have generated, what do you think is the difference between the words? Okay, so it's very, very powerful for that type of thing. But there are certain things that LLMs don't do very well. They don't generate word frequency lists very well. So, for example, just to give one example, but we could talk a lot about this. If I say, okay, Chat GPT, okay, Gemini, what are the words that start with SPRI that you think are the top 20 words? These are going to be the words from Chat GPT. This is what it actually suggested. These are the words from Gemini. These are actually the top 20 words in COCA, which has data from a lot of different genres. And these are the top 20 words from iWeb, okay? This 14 billion word corpus from just web pages. The important thing is that the words that are in orange here, the LLMs, both GPT and Gemini, think that, for example, sprightly is in the top 20 words, starting with SPRI. But that actually is not one of the top 20 words in either of these two corpora. So all of these words in orange are words that the LLM thinks are really frequent, but they're not. The words in yellow are words that really are frequent in the corpus or the corpora, these two corpora, but that the LLMs don't think are very frequent. So LLMs really do a pretty bad job of guessing the most frequent words in a corpus. They also don't do a very good job with guessing the frequency of phrases. So, for example, if I say, hey, ChatGPT, Gemini, what are the words or the phrases for dark followed by noun? Okay. These are the top 5 that GPT said. These are the top 5 from Gemini. But all of the ones in orange are phrases that were not in the top 5 phrases of either COCA, which has a lot of genres, or iWeb, which is really large, but it's just web-based text. So, and all of the ones in red are ones that were frequent in the corpus, but were not predicted by the LLMs. So, if a language learner says, find me nouns that occur near this word, verbs that occur near this verb, it actually doesn't do a very good job with matching up with the corpus data. What about variation? Okay, so I did a number of tests. Here I'm first going to talk about genre-based variation, where I gave ChatGPT and Gemini a bunch of words and I said, tell me whether or not these words would be the most frequent in fiction or spoken or magazines or newspapers or academic or TV and movie scripts and so on. Overall, the LLMs did okay with this, even with subgenres. So, for example, in academic writing, I'd say, is this the most common in educational texts or humanities or medicine? All the ones in green are where it got it right. The ones that weren't in green, it didn't know. So it does an okay job, but it's not, I mean, there certainly are some issues where the LLM really can't guess the right genre or right subgenre. What about historical variation? So, for example, here I'm looking at words that, so there's this COHA corpus, COHA, Corpus of Historical American English. It's 475 million words from the last 200 years of American English. So I said, okay, I'm going to give you ChatGPT or Gemini. I'm going to give you a number of words. You tell me what decade you think these words really started increasing in frequency. Overall, it did fairly well on average. It was about one and a half decade away from what the corpus data actually shows. So if it really started increasing in the 1930s, the LLMs might say, well, the 1920s or the 1940s. Okay, so there may be 1 or 2 decades away. The thing is, for certain kinds of words that are not really obvious. So, for example, glasnost, clearly that's the 1980s, right? How could you get that wrong? So the corpus does quite well. But for a word like screwy or foxhole or schemata, where it's not clear what decade this might have really increased in frequency, the LLM doesn't do nearly as well. And that actually ends up being really important. That means that the LLM is not just using corpus data, it's using extra linguistic information. Same thing with variation across dialects. So if I give it a number of words and I say, okay, here's these words, you tell me which of these 10 countries this word is most frequent in. It gets a number of these right, but it gets really obvious words like post-apartheid. Well, duh, that's going to be from South Africa. Or Eurosceptic, that's going to be the UK. Okay. Vedic, intercaste, obviously that's going to be from India. Okay. So it does okay in terms of variation, but there are still issues. Okay. So maybe it's not a question then of either or. Okay. So using corpora or using AI. Okay. What we've seen is that the corpora, they provide really good frequency data. They provide really good data on variation between genres, between time periods, between dialects. The LLMs, AI, is very, very good at classifying data and analyzing data, but not generating data. It doesn't generate word or phrase, words or phrases very well. So why not use these two together? Why not use the advantage of corpora and the advantage of LLMs? So that's what I'll be talking about for the rest of the presentation. Okay. So here then, what we'll do is we'll combine the two. We'll use LLMs for classifying and for possibly explaining corpus data. I'm going to give lots of examples of this, but basically what happens is that the corpus takes the corpus data. It uses what's called an API, okay, which is a way of sending data to another site where it's analyzed. So in this case, we're taking corpus data, we're sending it to ChatGPT or to Gemini or to Claude or to Mistral or to DeepSeek or whatever. And then it sends back the categorizations or the explanation, and then we integrate that right into the corpus interface. So these are the LLMs that are currently available. And of course, the LLMs are not perfect. They're going to make mistakes. But my experience is that in many, many cases, they are as good or better than even trained linguists. Not always, but many times. Okay. And they're especially useful for language learners. And there really is nothing like this that is available yet with any other online corpora. So let's look at some concrete examples of how this works. Let's first talk about categorizing collocates and phrases. Okay, so if you remember from Sketch Engine, again, that's a different website than englishcorpora.org. And sorry, the sun's coming in through the window here, so I apologize for the strange shadows that you're seeing here for a minute. This is what you would see at Sketch Engine if you say, what are the collocates, the nearby words for cap, C-A-P, okay? But notice that it's just a big, long list of words, okay? Even with englishcorpora.org, yeah, okay, it groups them into nouns, adjectives, verbs, adverbs, okay? So here we're looking at bow, B-O-W, but crucially, B-O-W could be bow, like bow and arrow, or a bow on clothing, or it could be bow, like the bow of a ship, okay? So yeah, you can see these collocates, but they're just big, long lists. But what you can do, you can click on Use AI to group these. It sends them to the LLM, ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever, and then it comes back and it says, okay, these are the collocates that refer to clothing. These are the collocates that refer to ships. These are the collocates that refer to bows and arrows, and so on. So it does this really nice semantic categorization. Another example, so with COCA, you get the collocates grouped already by part of speech. With some of the corpora, they don't even group them by part of speech. It's just a big long list of collocates, like for cap. But again, you just click on categorize. It sends it to the LLM and it says, these are the collocates dealing with clothing. These are the collocates for cap dealing with finance. These are the collocates dealing with the cap on the top of a bottle, for example. Okay. And again, you can click on any of those to see it in context. So you can do the same thing because it uses the same interface. You can do the same thing with the Corpus del Español. And if you'll excuse me for 10 seconds, I'm going to close the persianas, the blinds on my window, so that we're not getting this really weird shadow. So sorry, I will be back in 10 seconds.
Don't worry, thank you.
Okay, hopefully that's a little bit better, so that's not so obnoxious. All right, so same thing for Spanish. We can search for the collocates of a given word, for example, hilo, okay? And these are the most common collocates: dental, argumental, hilo, pende, mueven, aguja, negro, perder, rojo, so on. But again, it's just a big long list of words. But we can click on categorize, and now it groups them into the semantic categories. And this is something that I'll mention several times. This isn't just in English. You can also choose the language that you want to use for the category name and for the explanation. So I could choose, for example, to see this in Spanish, the collocates of hilo, materiales de hilo, características físicas, formas y presentaciones, técnicas y procesos, along with the explanation of that, okay? And you can do that in 30 different languages. Obviously, for Spanish, it's going to be the most useful in Spanish. But if you want to see it in English, or if you live in Brazil and you're learning Spanish, you can do that as well. You can see it in Portuguese. So another example, what are the nouns that occur near tela? This is the big long list. You click on categorize, and now it gives you the collocates grouped semantically by the large language model. It takes just 3 or 4 seconds for it to send the collocates to the LLM and then send the data back and then to display it in the corpus interface. You can do this for phrases as well. So for example, soft noun, okay? These are the most common phrases for soft noun in COCA. You can click on categorize. It sends them to the large language model, and then it comes back and it groups the phrases semantically. Same thing for Spanish, noun suave, all forms of suave. So these are the phrases. You click on categorize, it sends them to the LLM, and it comes back with them categorized semantically. Again, if you want that displayed in Spanish or Portuguese or Chinese, you can do that. Okay, remember where we saw that with Sketch Engine, for example, you can compare the collocates of word 1 and word 2. So for example, these are the collocates of 2 words that are very closely related semantically: quandary and predicament. Okay, you can get a display that's similar to this with EnglishCorpora.org. These are the collocates that occur with quandary. These are the collocates that occur with predicament. But crucially, you're just looking at big, long lists of words. But using AI, you can click on Use AI to compare. It sends this data to the large language model, and then it says, okay, based on the collocates, this is what it looks like quandary means. Based on the collocates, this is what it looks like predicament means. And crucially, based on the collocates, this is the difference between word 1 and word 2. So the LLM does all of that. Now imagine how useful that would be for a language learner, for a teacher in China or in Vietnam or in Czech Republic, to be able to get, or Mexico, to be able to get these really wonderful explanations of what the corpus data, what they tell us about the meanings of 2 words. Here's another example, provoke and incite. Really, really similar words. We send it to the LLM and it comes back with something like this. Now, of course, we can do this for Spanish. So, for example, in English, for an English learner, the difference between gozar de and disfrutar de, this is a hard distinction for English speakers because in English, both of these are expressed as enjoy, okay? But in Spanish, obviously, there's a difference in meaning. So here are the collocates with gozar de, the collocates with disfrutar de. We click on use AI to compare, and then we get a nice explanation. Here we have it in Spanish, but if I'm an English speaker, I'm learning Spanish, I can have this displayed in English as well. Another example, I could say, what's the difference between contienda and disputa? So these are the collocates from the corpus with contienda, the collocates with disputa. I use AI to compare, and it comes back with something like this. And it actually is really, really a good explanation of the difference. So that's a little bit about using LLMs, AI, for collocates and to compare words with collocates. Let's talk about comparing across different sections of a corpus, different genres, different time periods, different dialects. Okay, so for example, in COCA, we could say, show me the collocates of chain in fiction versus the collocates of chain in academic. So this is a big long list of words near chain in fiction, big long list of words near chain in academic. We could click on use AI to compare, and it comes back with something like this. And 9 times out of 10, the explanation that it gives are honestly as good as I, as a native speaker, a trained linguist, could do. We can compare historical periods. So, for example, collocates of women in this 475 million word corpus of historical American English. So words that occur near women in the 1800s versus the last 40 or 50 years. I click on use AI to compare, and the explanation of the difference is really, really good. If I want this explanation in Spanish or in Portuguese or in Chinese or in Afrikaans, I can have it in any one of 30 different languages. Same thing for comparing dialects. So globe is a 2 billion word corpus that compares 20 different English speaking countries. I could say, show me the collocates of scheme, the adjectives with scheme in the United States and Great Britain. And notice that these are more negative in the United States because scheme is used differently. I click on use AI to compare, and it says, well, based on the collocates, the US examples lean towards the negative or potentially illicit use of scheme, whereas in the UK, it's more neutral. So it does a really good job comparing these. Well, same thing with Spanish. So for example, in the web dialects corpus of Spanish, Okay, these are 20 different countries, 2 billion words, and I can say compare anything in country 1 and country 2. So here I'm saying compare the collocates of torta in Spain. Oops, sorry. This is Spain. This should be clicked on Mexico. It's just I took the screenshot too quickly. So Spain and Mexico. Okay. So it will come back and it'll say these are the collocates of torta in Spain. These are the collocates of torta in Mexico. Okay. And there is a semantic difference, what torta means. And it's going to notice that when I click on use AI to compare. But it's also going to say, it looks like in Spain, there's something going on with dar, the forms of dar, that maybe are an idiomatic use of torta. So in Spain, as you probably know, if you say le di una torta fuerte, that means I smacked him in the side of the head. Okay. And it knows that. So again, here it's telling me this in English. If I want it in Spanish, I just click on Spanish and I'd get it. Again, for example, collocates of guagua in,
Professor,
yeah,
Professor, could Davis, could we interrupt just a bit because we lost your signal? Should I write? Tengo que escribirlo.
Just with your computer. En YouTube no se puede.
should I start sharing it again?
No, no. En YouTube se está viendo. En YouTube se está
So in YouTube, it's okay, I'm told. So we can continue with, yeah, sorry, just because we lost the presentation here in the classroom. But we'll try to fix it.
Can you see anything in that classroom?
And well, just a code for Apple. But I guess it's going to being taken care in the computational department.
I'm happy to wait 2 or 3 minutes so that we can get a signal again that you can see there in that room.
Y es que están en el departamento de sistemas y no deben estar escuchando de hecho. Yeah, could we, I guess it's important to see the presentation for us. So yes, we can see it because I see that many of us have computer laptops with us. So yes, we can continue and see the presentation in YouTube.
Okay. All right.
Thank you,
So
sir.
just kind of share the computer and hopefully you can see that. Okay. All right. So what we're looking at here is, for example, the collocates of guagua. Okay. In Puerto Rico or the zona caribeña compared to Chile. So these are the collocates of guagua in la zona caribeña compared to the collocates of guagua in Chile. And we can click on use AI to compare, and it knows very well. It says, okay, this is the difference between the two countries. La diferencia en los collocates, las palabras colocadas de guagua entre ambas regiones revela bla, bla, bla. En uno se refiere al transporte público, en el otro se refiere a un bebé, un niño pequeño. Okay? So AI is really, really good at analyzing data. Generating data, not so much, but analyzing, yeah. So in these cases, we were comparing two different parts in the corpus, but you can also compare across the entire, all of the sections of a corpus. So for example, these are phrases for adjective food in the historical corpus of English. Okay, so we can see the frequency of all of these phrases in each decade from 1820s to the 2010s. Okay, but that's a lot of data. That's hard for people to analyze. So you click on analyze, boom. Now the LLM says, okay, these are the types of phrases for adjective food that we saw in the 1800s or in the 1910s or in the 1940s or in the 1970s. And again, I could get that in English or Spanish or any one of 30 different languages. Same thing here, I'm comparing genres in COCA for soft noun, all of the different genres. I can click on analyze and it says, okay, and this is Google, Gemini saying, all right, it looks like these are the phrases with soft noun in academic or fiction or magazines or newspapers. So we have lots and lots and lots of corpus data. It's almost overwhelming, but the large language model can sort through and organize all of that data very quickly. Same thing with dialects. These are words ending in ism, ISM, in the 20 countries in the globe corpus. Tourism, criticism, mechanism, terrorism, journalism, blah, blah, blah. I click on analyze, and now we see, okay, these words or phrases are used more in these countries. These words or phrases are used more in other countries. We can do the same thing in the Spanish corpus. And there's a typo here. This should be obviously ismo rather than ism. So ismo words in the 20 countries in Corpus del Español web dialects. So mismo, asimismo, organismo, periodismo, socialismo, optimismo, metabolismo, so on. We click on analyze and it says, okay, Kirchnerismo, Peronismo are used more in Argentina. Socialismo is used more in Cuba. Chavismo is used more in Venezuela. Franquismo is used more in Spain, and it explains why. Okay, so one simple click, and we get this really nice explanation from the large language models. In those cases, we're looking at specific words and phrases, but the corpora also allow us to look at charts that compare different sections of the corpus. So for example, in COCA, I could say look for conjunction followed by pronoun, followed by a form of be, followed by like, followed by a comma. So this is going to be, and I was like, and she was like, and then I was like, and then they were like, blah, blah, blah. I click on use AI to analyze. It sends it off, for example, to Gemini, and it explains why I'm seeing higher in or in TV and movie scripts. And it also tells me, oh, well, in academic, this is how you would express that. Historical, here I'm looking at need followed by negation in the historical corpus, like needn't, okay, versus don't need to. You can see it's decreasing over time. I click on Use AI to Analyze, and it does a very, very good job explaining the decrease in post-verbal negation. Same thing for dialects. The corpus shows me, for example, soft day is much more common in Ireland. I click on Use AI to Analyze, and it explains to me very well what's going on, how I'd express this in other dialects. Now I can do the same thing for Spanish. So for example, why, which as I'm sure you know, in Spain it means cool, okay? The corpus shows that this is used much, much more in Spain. I click on Use AI to Analyze, and it tells me what's going on. It tells me how the same thing would be expressed in other dialects, and I could click on other words, like for example, chido in Mexico, or chévere, or in la zona caribeña, chévere, or copado in Argentina. So it shows me what the variance would be in other dialects, and then I can see the frequency there. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned, and for those of you that know about large language models, you'd be like, yeah, but don't they make mistakes? Well, of course they make mistakes. And let me give you an example or two of that. So, for example, my wife, who taught Spanish for 30 years, she learned Spanish in Chile. And in Chile, to say, for example, son novios, él es novio de ella, they'd say pololear. That means to be a boyfriend, to be a girlfriend. So in the corpus, if I say, show me a chart of pololear, yeah, it shows me that it's much more common in Chile. Then I click on Use AI to Analyze. And, but then there's going to be some problems here. Well, first of all, and this is in English, but again, we could get this in Spanish if we want. Gemini does a great job with this. It says, well, in Chile, pololear means to date or go steady. This is what's going on. Claude from Anthropic, it does a great job with this as well. But then Meta from, or Llama from Meta, it says, pololear, pololear. Pololear might be the preferred term for polarize or to make polar. That's crazy. That's wrong. So it just was hallucinating. Or, for example, GPT. I mean, this one is almost hilarious. It says, oh, pololear, that refers to the act of playing polo. And countries like Chile, where they play polo a lot, that's probably why they use pololear. So it's just totally hallucinating in this case, okay? So do the LLMs make mistakes? Yes, they do sometimes. And sometimes it's almost comical how bad it is. But in many, many other cases, it just does a really good job. So for example, the syntactic construction, ¿qué tú crees? ¿Qué tú piensas? ¿Qué tú haces? Which is common, for example, in Cuba or Puerto Rico. And the corpus shows us that. Gemini explains that really, really well. Claude from Anthropic explains that really well. It talks about null subjects, blah, blah, blah. And again, I could get that in Spanish. Or, for example, ¿qué tan adjetivo? In Mexican Spanish, ¿qué tan alto eres ese chico? ¿Qué tan bueno? Okay. In Mexican Spanish, that's fine, but it sounds horrible. in Spain Spanish. And so they'd say, oh, in Peninsular Spanish, you'd say, como de alto es ese chico, or cuán alto, cuán importante es eso. And so again, just one little click, use AI to analyze. It explains the corpus data really well. Okay, just about 5 or 6 more minutes, then I'll be done, and I'm happy to take questions. Okay, so one other thing you can do with with AI, if you have concordance lines where it's showing you the patterns in which a word or phrase occurs, you can just click on Use AI to find patterns. So for example, if I look for the word fathom, which means to understand, okay, in English, this is nearly always preceded by a negative word, almost always. If I click on Use AI to find patterns, it says, well, semantic prosody, fathom, it's usually expresses negation, difficulty. It's nearly always preceded by a negative word. Pragmatic function, it expresses a lack of understanding or comprehension. So with these concordance lines, I just click and it gives me all of this useful information with just one click. Another example, naked eye. This is an example that John Sinclair, a famous corpus linguist from England, he liked to give this. This is used with very few, it's used in very few fixed phrases like invisible to the naked eye or visible to the naked eye. So I click on analyze this and it comes back and it says, oh, it's used mainly in these set phrases, and it's also used mainly talking about astronomy or seeing things with microscopes, okay? Imagine how useful that would be for a language learner to get all of that information, the domain, the register, the grammatical patterns for a particular word or phrase. Same thing for Spanish. Incurrir, okay? These are the sample phrases, concordance lines for incurrir. So I could click on Use AI to find patterns, and it says, okay, well, these are the prepositions that are used with it. This is semantic prosody. En general, incurrir tiene una prosodia semántica negativa, se asocia con consecuencias indeseables, errores, faltas, delitos, gatos no deseados, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So the last thing I want to talk about is having the LLM generate words and phrases. Now remember, I told you half an hour ago, the LLM, they're bad at generating words and phrases. So why would we even want to use this capability? Well, in 2 or 3 minutes, you'll understand this better, okay? What happens is that I can say, okay, LLM, AI, generate a whole bunch of words and phrases related to a particular semantic category. And then it will generate all these words or phrases, and then I'll compare that to the actual corpus data and display these in frequency by the frequency in the corpus. So let's take an example. I could say, find words or phrases related to astronomy. Click submit, and it sends this to the LLM. The LLM comes up with a bunch of words and phrases: solar system, galaxy, Hubble Space Telescope dark matter, and then I very quickly look up the frequency of each of those words and phrases in the corpus. And then I display this list of LLM generated words and phrases based on their frequency in the corpus. And of course, you can see the words and phrases in context. So same thing for Spanish. I could say, find words and phrases related to astronomía. So it comes back with planeta, universo, estrella, materia oscura, agujero negro. And if I want, it will even give me a short little Spanish definition for each of these. Now, you can get really, really complicated in terms of what you're looking for. So, for example, find words or phrases related to, and then I type in professions that belonged mainly to women in the 1800s. So that's pretty abstract, right? It sends that to the LLM. It comes back with things like housekeeper, chambermaid, washerwoman, charwoman. And it looks each of these up in the corpus. In this case, it's the historical corpus, and it shows me the frequency. Or I could say, using the TV corpus, which has 325 million words, find words and phrases related to me being tired. And it will come back with things like, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I'm worn out, I'm wiped out. Now let's see how we could do this for Spanish. Now, even without using LLMs in the Corpus del Español and in EnglishCorpora.org, you can search by synonyms. So, for example, you could say, find me estar, followed by a synonym of cansado. And it would give you things like this. But here, if I say find concept or find words and phrases related to the concept estar cansado, then it's going to come back with things like débil, al máximo, which is part of a phrase, agotado, quemado, destrozado, desanimado, hasta arriba, aturdido, and so on. Okay. I could also say, for example, okay, using the now corpus, which has 23 billion words and has 10 million new words every day, give me a list of famous actresses, or give me words and phrases related to famous actresses. Well, this isn't really what I wanted. It's related to the concept of actresses, Hollywood, critically acclaimed fashion icon. But if I say, okay, well, these are some good examples of what I'm looking for, then it comes back with a much better list. It says, oh, I get it. You want a list of famous actresses. Well, here they are. And then I can see the frequency by year. So Zendaya, hardly at all in 2011, but used a lot in 2025. Okay. Or, yeah. All right. As I mentioned, you can also get definitions. So, for example, words and phrases related to nuclear reactors, and show me the definition. So not only does it give me the words and phrases, it gives me the definitions. And then I could say, oh, radioactive decay, process of unstable nuclei losing energy. That looks interesting. I could click on this arrow, and then it sends that to the LLM. And now I get the words and phrases related to radioactive decay, along with each of their definitions. Just about done, about 2 more minutes. You can even go across languages with this. So I could say, find words and phrases related to, let's say that you're a Spanish speaker and you know the word manguera, but so you could say, find me words and phrases related to the word manguera in Spanish. And so it looks and it says, oh, manguera, I think that means garden hose in English. Okay, well, these are words and phrases related to garden hose in English. Garden hose, soaker hose knowledge, flexible hose. But all of that is based off of the simple search, manguera in Spanish. And then I get all of that for English. I can go the other direction. If I'm a native English speaker and I want to find words related to garden hose in Spanish, I say, find me words and phrases related to garden hose. And then it comes back with grifo, sistema de riego automático. And again, it gives me the definition. I can click on any of those and see the word or phrase used in context. I can do direct translation. So go from Spanish mediante una serie. I want to see the words and phrases in English in a series of, through a series of, with a series of, using a series of. Or I can rephrase things. So for example, find me phrases related to pleasing scenery. And the AI comes back with a bunch of words and phrases. We look them up in the corpus: natural beauty, beautiful scenery, stunning views, beautiful landscape. And again, we can see those in context. Same thing for Spanish. Rephrase paisaje bonito. So it comes back with vista hermosa, una vista panorámica, bello paisaje, paisaje hermoso, un lugar pintoresco, and so on. Okay. So again, it sends that concept, that word, that phrase to the LLM. It sends back a lot of words, phrases, and we look them up in the corpus. One last example, English speakers, I know this because I taught Spanish for a long time, to say it makes sense, they're going to translate this directly, incorrectly, as hace sentido, which of course doesn't make any sense in Spanish. But they'll say, pero eso no hace sentido, okay? Because they're translating from English. But you can say, okay, find me phrases related to the incorrect hace sentido, and it comes back with está claro, se entiende, tiene sentido, es lógico, es coherente, tiene lógica, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So to conclude, the corpora from EnglishCorpora.org, these are the most widely used corpora of English. They provide very rich data. The Spanish corpora are also widely used. And honestly, they don't do a great job with time periods or with genres. But for dialects, yeah, it's pretty good. We've seen that the LLMs are great at classifying collocates, and the LLMs are very good at providing possible explanations for variation. So what I've done is these two resources are now seamlessly integrated: the corpus data and the categorization and explanations from AI, from the LLMs. So you can kind of think of this motto, this lemma: corpora come first, AI comes second, but we get insights faster. These are the LLMs that are currently available. This has been up and running since September 2025. And these AI features are unique among online corpora, and hopefully they'll make the corpora even more useful for teachers, learners, and researchers. Okay, thanks very much. Sorry I went a little bit longer, but I'm more than happy to take any questions that you might have now dealing with the corpus side of things, dealing with AI. I'm not an expert on AI. I am not an expert on LLMs, but understanding that, I'll do the best I can to answer any questions you might have.
Well, thank you very much for this very rich presentation. We will still have some time for opening a space for questions and answers. So yes.
I think towards the end you went a little fast, so I didn't get exactly what you meant about definitions. You asked the model for definitions of the language, but you didn't check with the corpus data like you did with the other exercises, or did you?
Yeah, so this is an example of, actually, let me go back a little bit further. Yeah, we'll do this one. Okay, so I say, find me phrases related to, in Spanish, related to the English phrase garden hose. So, and I also send, as part of the prompt to the large language model, the prompt also says, and besides giving me the words and phrases that are related to this concept, also give me the definitions in Spanish, in English, in German, whatever, for each one of those words and phrases. So these short definitions are generated by the large language model. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, are the definitions perfect? No. But for a language learner, for a language teacher, are they useful? Yeah. Yeah, I would say they're really quite useful. I mean, I'm looking at some of these boquilla. I mean, I know what boca means, but boquilla, the fact that I can see parte de la manguera que controla el flujo. Oh, okay. Okay, like a valve. Okay, I get it. I understand what's going on.
Okay.
I have a question. So, thanks for your talk. I must say I was a very eager user of your corpus. It was really helpful for me in my education and my PhD. So, my question is twofold. The first question is hypothetical. Do you think back in time, if this technology will be available and when you start the corpus, will you use these techniques, these models to linguistic analysis, to tag in the data? And the second question is, what could be the implementation of these LLMs regarding syntax? Because they are very useful with semantics, but I think syntax analysis is left behind. Thank you.
Yeah, so let me answer the second question first, and then I've got a question about your first question. So I gave a few examples here. For example, the decrease very fast. Sorry. Okay, so this is an example from English, the decrease in post-verbal negation, needn't or need not, and over time it's become don't need to, okay? If you look at that explanation, it's not bad, okay? and going to Spanish, this que tu verb, okay? The explanation given from Gemini, given from Claude, it's really quite good. I mean, it's talking about pro-drop languages and so on. Now, crucially, the prompt that was sent to the LLM said, in 100 or 150 words or less, explain what's going on. So in this case of ¿qué tú crees? ¿Qué tú piensas? Which is common in Cuba, Puerto Rico, and so on. Do we have a whole paper worth of explanation here? No, of course not. Because part of it is we said, limit your explanation to 150 words. So it's just the very, very, very beginning of a syntactic explanation. You'd have to do much, much more back and forth, back and forth, back and forth with the corpus to really have it flesh things out in terms of syntactic phenomena. So that's a good question. No sé si entiendo bien la primera pregunta. Si quieres hacérmela en español, está bien. No sé si la entendí muy bien.
La idea es que si esta tecnología existiera cuando empezó el corpus, la hubiera implementado para el análisis de los datos. ¿Vale?
Sí, por ejemplo, para etiquetear el corpus. Sí, pero todavía sería muy útil un etiquetador, un tagger. No creo que se pueda hacer todo eso solo mediante la inteligencia artificial. Todavía necesitamos ciertas herramientas, taggers y cosas así para analizar el corpus sintácticamente. Entonces, si hubiera ayudado hasta cierto punto, pero todavía hacían falta herramientas como taggers y cosas así. No sé si eso contestó la pregunta. Si quieres seguir. Sí, ok.
No. Thank you. There is a question in YouTube. I'm going to try my best. It's a bit long, but I will read it. Dr. Davis, thank you. Your discussion about combining LLMs with corpora to study collocational and diachronic variation is fascinating. I personally work with morphology and I'm interested in productivity computations. Reference P asterisk in many papers has been done in HAL LLM, but I'm particularly interested in how to translate that into large empirical corpora, or perhaps into an LLM plus corpus framework like the one you described. From your perspective, how could that combined approach enhance the way we measure or interpret morphological productivity across genres or time?
That's a good question. Okay, so this, I mean, all of these questions have been really good. That one is, the answer is complicated in the sense that, quite honestly, LLMs, okay, let me back up a little bit. When the data is sent to the large language model, it takes the corpus data and it creates a prompt, okay, that is based off of that corpus data, but the prompt is going to be in a certain format. So the prompt is going to say, hey, explain why these words are more frequent in this time period or this dialect or this genre. That's what the prompt says. What this question is asking is, okay, I would like a prompt that asks about morphological productivity. Unfortunately, that is not the prompt that is going to be sent to the large language model. There is no prompt dealing with morphological productivity. So there's no way to send that question to the LLM, and there's no way to get any meaningful data back. So this brings up an important point. The questions that we're asking are a limited subset of all of the questions that we would want to ask, just because there's no way to ask every possible question. You're limited by what the prompts allow. And this goes back to the question before about syntax. So if you wanted to go back and forth, okay, well, how about using, this generative model? Or how about using cognitive grammar or categorical grammar or grammaticalization? How would this be explained with grammaticalization? Well, you can't, because the prompt can't ask that. Now, there's a reason for that. It's because if I allowed these open-ended prompts, ask anything you want about this data, conceivably, people could say, oh, forget the data. Tell me some jokes in Chinese. Tell me whether inflation will increase or decrease in Mexico the next year. Tell me how to fix my car. You see, if users can ask any question, then maybe they won't limit it to the data that is being sent from the corpus. They'll ask about anything. They could start asking questions that will get me blocked, asking about pornography or hate speech. So I had to limit the question, the prompt that was sent to the LLM. That's a long way of saying there's a lot of limitations in terms of what the types of analysis that can be done. Great question, and I wish I had a more optimistic answer, but that's the way it works.
This was a question by Abigail Flores, by the way. Thank you very much for your question. I'll read another one from YouTube, from Teacher David. I do appreciate your contributions, and I would like to ask you the following question. Which would be your thoughts and recommendations on constructional analysis?
Yeah, we run into the same problem with constructional analysis. So let me go to we'll stay with this. Okay, so this is the gozar de, disfrutar de. So unfortunately, it's the same answer that I just gave, and I wish it were different. To do constructional analysis, Stefan Gries and so on, I would have to send different data to the large language model, and I would have to ask it, I would have to give it a prompt dealing with, okay, use constructional analysis to analyze what's going on here. But that's too open-ended for the reasons I just gave. That if people can say, oh, well, analyze this data from a constructional point of view, or analyze this from a systemic functional point of view, they could also say, tell me some jokes in Spanish. give me some pornography, tell me how to fix my car. And I don't want to allow those questions. So again, the range of questions are limited out of necessity. I wish that it were different, but it's not. So they're very good for certain things. They are not useful at all for a number of other things, unfortunately. So great question. I wish there was a different answer.
¿Alguna otra pregunta? No.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I think it's very interesting. I wanted to know, I was just looking for it because I'm particularly interested in this specific part of the programming of LLMs. I wonder if there could be a different approach to this kind of search and processing of words and especially words, considering the possibility of this emerging technology that is called like morph-aware tokenization. I don't know if you already use this. I think it's fairly new. But the thing is, so tokens do not coincide with morphs, right? Like they're not the same thing because tokens are successions of characters, and they do not always coincide with what we understand as morphs. So if we could actually improve upon that and start using morphs instead of tokens as we know them now, could this mean like another way of processing this that could imply in the future, for instance, the possibility of the LLMs not committing, not being so prone to hallucinations because they can identify what that morph means. But this question only makes sense if you have already read these papers on morph tokenization. It's what I have been looking these past few days, and I was very interested in it. So I was like just checking a few references, but I wanted to know if you have already heard of this technology and what do you think if you have. Thank you.
Yeah, I actually have not heard of that. It sounds really, really interesting. And please feel free to send me an email. I'd be really interested in reading a paper or two about that. I'm not familiar with that, but it does bring up a related question related to what we've just been talking about. There are so many cases where researchers can use the corpora to provide raw data, okay? So whether or not it's syntactic data, morphological data, and so on. And then they extract that data from the corpus and then, crucially, not within the corpus interface, but on their own, in their own ChatGPT or Gemini window. They take the corpus data and they say, okay, I got this data from a corpus. Now, can you help me analyze it? Can you help me to analyze it morfológicamente, sintácticamente, lo que sea, using this framework that I have just told you about, and you tell the LLM about that. So again, what the corpora can do with LLMs is limited to prompts, but there is so much that you can do by taking the raw data and analyzing it yourself with your own ChatGPT session and so on. So I think hopefully that ties into the question that you have. But I would be very interested in reading a paper or two about what you're talking about, if you wouldn't mind sending me an email.
I will. I think it's actually fairly interesting because I have studied the way LLMs construct text, and usually a lot of mistakes. I have this like tiny hypothesis that it's not fairly researched, it's not well researched because I am exploring it, but I start to wonder if one of the problems with this kind of mistakes is related to using tokens instead of morphs for interpretation. And I think that this what you have explained, the possibility of extracting this raw data and conducting like a meta-analysis instead of it, not in the in the paper sense, like in the strict sense of the word, I think maybe can improve on the quality of the results. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, and just to follow up on this, I mean, like I said, I am no expert at all on large language models. One of my sons is actually getting a doctorate in AI, in large language models, machine learning, natural language processing from the University of Illinois. So he knows everything about, what's going on under the surface. But as you mentioned, one of the problems is that, let's say we have a word like quisiéramos, okay? So how is the large language model going to break that word quisiéramos down into tokens? Well, it's going to say there's a root, quis. It's going to say there's a nosotros form here, first person plural, because I see a mos on the end. There's some sense of conditionality here. But see, there's all these semantic things, morphological things. We've got quisiéramos, or an example like trajo. How do you break trajo down to traer plus third person singular plus preterite? What part of trajo means preterite? What part means third person? You see the problem of breaking that apart into tokens. For English, this is a trivial matter because English morphology is so simple. But for Spanish or for Turkish, it's so much more complicated. And how large language models are doing that? That's the problem. They're trained so much on English that when they do Spanish or Turkish, they're going to have issues. They're going to have problems. Entonces, muchas palabras, una respuesta muy larga para intentar contestar esa pregunta, pero una pregunta muy buena. Muchas gracias.
I will take your word on the maybe the email exchange, because I have a few things to show you.
Sí, claro que sí. Por favor, me encantaría.
Well, I will take a time for one question myself. I'm interested in the way you feed the LLM, the data, the how you feed the data to the LLM. I assume that for some cases you can do it like if it's a small table, that can be done. It's not a big issue. But if for example, there's collocations and many, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of them, I guess it's kind of complicated to do that. Is there any kind of pre-processing of the data, or, well, without giving away too much of the process, the inside process of the of your, well, of the whole interface?
Yeah, so tell you what, I'm going to very quickly try to do something in the corpus. So disfrutar de, all by noun. Okay, and I'm going to share my screen in just a minute.
I think it's
having
important. This could be also a way of giving some space for hallucinations as well, if that data is not properly fed, right?
Yeah. So, okay, I'm finally typing it in. Okay, now I'll share my screen. Okay, so let's see. So, I just see my screen.
Yes, I see.
So I did search. It's the one that I had in the PowerPoint, but where I'm comparing now for after gozar de disfrutar. So here's data. Okay. Then I click on UCI to compare. Here's the answer. And a person can come in, and I don't know if you can see this because the font is really, really small, but they can click on a button that says, see the prompt that was sent to the LLM and see the response that was received from the LLM. So, for example, here is the data, blah, 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 blah. And so in Spanish, then print a discussion telling us, and then give us this delimiter, blah, 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 and explain this, blah, blah, blah. And then here is all of the data. Okay. So there's like this template that is sitting there waiting for data from the corpus. And then I feed that data into this template that creates the prompt that is sent. And so people can look at that prompt. This is the one for comparing two words. The prompt would look different if we were comparing, let's say, fiction and academic or Mexico and Spain. The prompt would look quite different. But people can always see what the prompt is. They can also click to see what raw data that was received from the LM. If they say, wait, seeing something here, what did you actually get back from the large language model? The raw data, they can see that as well. So there is transparency in that, seeing what was sent and what was received back.
Okay, yeah, totally
Does that
understood.
help?
Very good to know as well. Okay, if there's no further questions, then we thank you again, Professor Davis, very much for your truly enriching presentation, and all of you for participating in today's session. Well, this way, this concludes the 9th session of the Language Technology Seminar. Thank you all. Good afternoon to everyone.
Gracias.
Well, but it's still live, but thank you very much, Professor. And we hope we have any other means of communication later, so that, well,
It was my pleasure.
because
Thanks so
we're
much.
using your comments a lot.
Okay, see ya.
Yeah, good.